Way back in February 2012, Radeon released its HD7770 for a price of £130 or $160 in the US. Codenamed Cape Verde XT, this ran on the same first generation 28nm G.Skill architecture as its bigger brothers from the Tahiti lineup. Sporting a core clock of 1GHz, 1GB of GDDR5 VRAM and 640 stream cores, it was great value for money. This video card sold very well to budget gamers as the pricing dropped quickly after its initial release, sometimes as low as £80. The icing on the cake was that nearly all power supplies were able to deliver its conservative requirements at only 80 watts TDP, provided you had a 6-pin connector. But is it still worth buying at a price of £30 in 2018? So I have an 8-game benchmark to see what this little card is capable of. Check the timestamps in the description box below if there's a specific game you want to jump ahead to. We'll be using the usual Skylake system with the specs also in the description box if you want to check it out. This is so the HD7770 is free from any bottlenecks like the Q6600 it was originally reviewed with last week. Up first we have PUBG, and I have to say that its performance was substantially improved from last week's benchmarks when paired with a capable processor. Although this game is not pretty at 1080p, very low settings with the scaling set to 70%, it was genuinely playable with an average frame rate of 56 FPS, 1% lows coming in at 38.5 and the 0.1% lows dropping to 24.2 FPS. We're off to a good start. Overwatch up next, and I was greeted with a very smooth and enjoyable experience on this title where the HD7770 gave very consistent results across all three benchmarks. At 1080p medium settings, the Cape Verde card clocked in an average of 78.5 FPS, staying above 60 FPS 99% of the time, with the 0.1% lows following very closely at 55.3 FPS. Those of you who enjoy playing Fortnite more than PUBG will be pleased to hear that with a decent processor, this card is able to deliver good performance at 900p medium settings. After 3 matches, the Radeon card was able to muster an average of 49 FPS, 1% lows of 36 and 0.1% lows of 27 FPS. However, I was surprised that Fortnite didn't run better considering PUBG's results. But there's no denying which game looked graphically superior. CSGO up next, and this was not much different from last week's results. Again, this was run at 1080p medium settings, and whilst this was still enjoyable to play, there were still some pretty significant frame drops like last week. Here the 7770 gave a higher average frame rate at 103.5 FPS and kept above 50 FPS 99% of the time. However, it did occasionally stutter down to 33.5 FPS. Even so, this didn't divert from what was otherwise a very playable performance. The well-optimised title Prey was a pretty smooth experience on this card as well. Granted, 720p medium settings isn't going to set the world on fire, but it is at least playable. If all you can afford is a £30 graphics card, then this will run the game at an average of 87.6 FPS with percentile figures of 63.3 and 38. Upping the resolution at the same settings to 900p did result in the game looking better, but the VRAM was at the point of saturation as shown by the percentile figures. Here the 7770 clocked in an average of 63.3 FPS, with the 1% and 0.1% lows coming in at 45.3 and 22.6 respectively. I'll let you decide if you want nicer graphics with some stutter or smoother performance with worse resolution. GTA 5 is still a very popular title, so I thought I'd give it a whirl. And I'm glad that I did, as it's probably the best looking game so far. I was able to push all the graphics to high with textures set to medium at 1080p with FXAA anti-aliasing, even though the game told me I was over my VRAM limit by 300MB. In this environment, the HD7770 was good for an average of 47 FPS, 1% lows only dipped to 40, with the 0.1% lows following sharply at 38 FPS. Great performance on this older title. Up next we have Rise of the Tomb Raider, which looks at least passable at 900p low settings. I found this to be the best trade-off between performance and frame rate. It's also worth noting that DX11 gave considerably lower frame rates, basically unplayable, so you'll definitely want to run this title on DX12 with any Radeon card that supports it. Here the 7770 was able to churn out an average of 40 FPS, with the percentile figures coming in closely at 34 and 30 FPS. pretty similar to last week's results as this is a GPU heavy title. Finally, we have Shadow of War, which is known for being a pretty tough game to run, so I wasn't expecting great results. But paired with a CPU that's more than capable, it gave some interesting results. Once again, we have to lower the resolution to 720p on the lowest preset, but it looked better than I was expecting. Here the 7770 gave very consistent results, returning an average of 37.6 FPS, staying above 31.6 FPS 99% of the time, and the 0.1% lows only dropped to 28 FPS, considerably smoother than last week. So there you have it guys, if £30 is your limit for a graphics card, then you could do far worse than Radeon's 6-year-old HD7770, especially if you only need a card to play esports titles like Overwatch and CSGO, then this will do it. Older titles up to 2015 will play fine, as demonstrated by GTA 5, however performance of this card on newer titles will need to have the resolution bumped down to 720p in most instances due to the 1GB frame buffer. Also, make sure you pair this with at least something like an i5 Sandy Bridge processor to avoid the frame rate tanking down to unplayable levels. But, is this the best you can expect from a £30 graphics card? Join me next week where I'll be reviewing a competitor from Team Green to see which one's worth your £30. Thanks for watching, I'll catch you guys in the next episode.